Hello and welcome to my page on Abeko Archery here on YouTube, and it's another day to talk about a lot of great footballing news here. Kindly subscribe to this page as we bring you a lot of footballing news every now and then, and of course, leave your comments. Your reactions are most important to this page as well here on YouTube. Now, quickly today we take a look at the Afcon draw that had happened yesterday, and the latest is that Ghana knows its group, and it is interesting to know how the whole reactions of the people and of course the group would be to Ghanaians. Well, is this the moment for Ghana to win the African Cup of Nations again? We'll run you through that. We'll look at the teams that have participated most and whether it's going to one of the big names in the African Cup of Nations history. But the focus, of course, is on the Black Stars of Ghana. First and foremost, please subscribe and leave your comments in the comment box. But let's focus on this. We take a good look at, of course, we'll be touching on Ghana's group and what the latest is with Ghana's group. But first, let's look at the teams that have participated, have had the most participation in the African Cup of Nations history. The draw was done yesterday from the first group to the sixth group. We know where each team is placed. The team that's qualified to the African Cup of Nations, a beautiful, draw that was drawn. And, of course, for Egypt have had 25 times in participation in the African Cup of Nations. So Egypt have showed themselves more as one of the nations that have, participated in the African Cup of Nations. And of course, for what they've done, they've gotten for themselves 7 times won the African Cup of Nations. So in 1997, in 1957, I should say, in 1959, in 1986, in 1998, in 2006, in 2008, and of course in 2010, all Egypt have had the African Cup of Nations for themselves. They've won the African Cup of Nations within this span or within this number of years. So it's quite important to know that Egypt is one of the teams that have participated, have had the most participation in the African Cup of Nations. Then the second on the block is Côte d'Ivoire. So Côte d'Ivoire have also participated 24 times in the African Cup of Nations, following Egypt keenly. So Egypt will be going into their 26th time of participation. Côte d'Ivoire will be going into their 25th time, and it follows in that order. So for Côte d'Ivoire or Ivory Coast, they've won the African Cup of Nations in 1992 and the recent one in 2015. It's been quite a number of years now. Isn't it? That for Ghana, it follows in that order after Ivory Coast or Côte d'Ivoire, and Ghana have had 23 appearances. I mean, the most on number 3, most participation in the African Cup of Nations history. Ghana have participated 23 times. In that 23 years that Ghana participated in the African Cup of Nations, they've won it in 1963. They've done that in 1965, done that again in 1978, and of course in 1982. And of course, we all know this because the cry of winning a trophy for the nation has been loud enough, and the fever has hit ground. That's rampant, and everyone knows and of course wants Ghana to win their next African Cup of Nations. Then Cameroon follows with 20 appearances or 20 participations, the most for an African country in the African Cup of Nations history. Cameroon comes for 20 times, and they won the trophy in 1984, 1998, I beg your pardon, 1988, in 2000, in 2002, and of course in 2017. It's quite important to note that Cameroon is the 4th country in the African land or on the African land to do most appearances at the African Cup of Nations. Then Tunisia comes on 5th with just 20 appearances, just as Cameroon, winning their only trophy in 2004. But with all this history, it's quite important to know that the African Cup of Nations, has a way of turning itself around. For Egypt, fortunately, it's Ghana that's having the same group with in Group B with Egypt. Ghana is having Egypt in its group, and it's important to know that Egypt is the country that has had the most participation in the African Cup of Nations history, and Ghana will be facing Egypt. But the good news is that the last time Ghana played Egypt at the Accra Sports Stadium, at the Baba Yara Sports Stadium, it was a 6-1 scoreline on the James Kwesi Appiah, and that was one that Ghanaians didn't expect. Ghanaians didn't know that that was going to be the picture, but at the end of the day, it was quite painted clear. But there are some important notes to keep in the setup. Now we look at Ghana's Group B. Group B comprises of Egypt, Ghana, Cape Verde, and Zimbabwe. Egypt, Ghana, Cape Verde, and Zimbabwe. Well, I see it to be very cool for Egypt, the team that has had the most participation in the African Cup of Nations history, to go through from this group, and of course for Ghana as well to follow Egypt in that suit to get out of the group. I mean, all respect to Cape Verde and Mozambique, but these are countries that have had the most appearances in these competitions and gathered some number of trophies for themselves. Egypt with the most 7 times in the African Cup of Nations history, but we look at the group for Ghana, and Egypt seem to stand tall a bit. The reason why I say Egypt stands tall a bit, for me, I mean, it's always going to be Egypt who will be qualifying with Ghana. Well, no matter how the event pans, it can be Ghana topping the group and Egypt following, or Egypt topping and Ghana following. But of course, Egypt is going to make it out of Group B. Interestingly, Egypt is still having its top scorer, still with the team, Mohamed Salah, who've had 51 goals for Egypt. And Mo Salah knows the history at stake when it comes to, of course, Ghana and Ghana and Egypt, because he knows that the last time it was Ghana that humiliated Egypt at home in their last result that gave the last game that gave a huge result between the two, and Egypt knows that. And of course, Mo Salah knows that it will be quite important to erase that and show their dominance, especially in a competitive game in an African Cup of Nations, which will be happening in Côte d'Ivoire. So 51 goals. Unfortunately for Ghana, the player who scored 51 goals for us, who is the top scorer in Ghana's history, is the baby Jet Asamoah. He has retired from football. A big news it is for Egypt as a country to go into. One of the motivations Egypt will be gathering is that Ghana do not have their top goal scorer, who's Asamoah, who scored 51 goals, who's not going to be in the setup in the African Cup of Nations in Group B, and that's all important fixture. But for Egypt, the most capped player is Ahmed Fati, who's done 136, the most capped player, 136, and it's important to know that Ghana is having its most capped player still around in Andre Morgan Dede Ayew. And Dede have scored 24 goals. We cannot depend on Dede for goals now, because of course he's advancing in age and what have you. But he's the most capped player, and going into some competitions of this sort, of course, experience is quite instrumental. The experience in the game is what is super crucial, and it will be important to note that. The Ayew's experience will all be needed. I mean, Ghanaians would have their say in relation to the day should be dropped ahead of this competition and what have you, because of what we've seen in the time past, and he's aging, and we've not had the best from the day and what have you, and the talks keep on going on and on. But he's gotten 24 goals for us. And the one that follows Kinley after the day Ayew is his brother Jordan Ayew, was still with a setup, who's gotten 20 goals, and Jordan is not also scoring, often for the Black Stars, but he's gotten 20 goals as well. And it's quite important to have some of these players in the setup. Well, Mo Salah knows that going into the game against the Black Stars of Ghana will be his 90th cap for Egypt. It will be a round number and a perfect time to score, to make it 52, to stamp his authority in that competition, and for that particular African Cup of Nations, which will be happening later on in Côte d'Ivoire. Then I feel the onus now lies on head coach of the Black Stars, Chris Hughton, to try and fine-tune the squad. This is an opportunity. The last African Cup of Nations was not quite pleasant. It was not that which gave us the smells and the goosebumps here in the country. Now Chris has an opportunity playing in a friendly game against Mexico and the United States of America, good competition for Mexico. When you move into the southern part of America, they've showed their dominance in the game, and they play quite as a unit. So it will give Ghana the ability to experiment a lot of things. I've mentioned this in my other video, and I indicated that, well, going into the African Cup of Nations proper, I feel Chris Hughton has the opportunity, because then again, Egypt is not the Egypt we know of the past. Egypt is not the Egypt that we knew with the likes of Ahmed Fati, the likes of Hossam, and those guys who played with a certain dominance, and they showed a lot of exploits in their last African Cup of Nations, advancing through to a pleasant slot. But of course, when you look at the number of times Egypt have done this in the African Cup of Nations, the number of trophies they've won, one would say that they could have showed a lot more exploit. But this is an opportunity that presents itself for Egypt, especially in that game against Ghana. They know it at the back of their mind that if they want to start their competition well, it's up against Ghana. Of course, Ghana is not playing their first game against Egypt, but it will be up to Ghana to of course, show that this is the year for Ghana as a country. And for Ghana, I've mentioned that Chris Hughton needs to come into the party. We have a lot of young chaps available, a lot of them that they're going to have their journey on, with the number of caps they are going together for the senior soccer team, the Black Stars of Ghana, and of course showing exploit in the African Cup of Nations as well. So the likes of Kudus Mohammed have a platform to show that he's a super world-class player. No pressure on him, but he has shown it in the English Premier League quite recently, showed it for the national team in our qualifying phases for the African Cup of Nations. He needs to show that dominance again. Jordan needs to come to the party with his experience. The likes of Antion Semenyo should show some glimpses. Osman Bukaris, the likes of the Alexander Jikus, and of course the other guys in the midfield who can come into the party. Babai Jishu and his brothers, who can, Elisha Owusu and those boys who can come and show that they really dined for this country. We do know, I cannot take it to read from the camp in Ivory Coast when we visited there for the African Cup of Nations that there's confusion at Ghana's camp, and it's that which is affecting the competition. Listen, one of the focuses of the FA president, I believe he wants to achieve, is focus on the national team and make sure that the glory days that Kwesi Antechi took the Black Stars to, will be able to hit that at the top hierarchy. And this might just present itself to be the opportunity for Ghana to win its next African Cup of Nations. The fit probably, and to give some of us the opportunity to see Ghana to lift an African Cup of Nations. And it's important to know that we can do it. Winning the African Cup of Nations is important with your group that you land yourself in, and the route that you pass on to get to the trophy. It's quite important. I feel Ghana is, let's begin with the group stages, and with Cape Verde and Mozambique in the same group as Ghana and Egypt. Ghana and Egypt stand tall, and it should not go and be that which we had against the likes of Lesotho, and we had a land like Comoros Island, showing Ghana that it plays football at the highest level. Really, this should be the African Cup of Nations for Ghana, and I'm quite optimistic that this will be that African Cup of Nations for the country. Of course, it's quite also then a material to know that the Black Stars of Ghana have this big opportunity for themselves. When I say this big opportunity, I look deep into the fixtures for Ghana. Ghana's first game is against Cape Verde, and it's all magic. You know why? Because it will give the Black Stars upper hand should they win, because their next game then will be against Egypt. So the first game for the Black Stars will happen on the 14th of January, which is a Sunday at the Felix. At the Stade Felix, the Stade Felix, stadium, and the Stade Felix Houphouët Stadium, and Felix Houphouët. This is French, of course. I need to put my French classes together. So Stade Felix Houphouët is where the Black Stars will be playing Cape Verde, and it's important to know that the Black Stars picking a win is quite material. It would enhance the chances of the team, to make sure they go into the Egypt game super strong. And the next game is against Egypt at the same venue. So if they familiarize themselves with Cape Verde, by winning against Cape Verde and having the upper hand, a game against Egypt would not be that to struggle, because then already the upper hand is there. On the 18th of January is when Ghana is playing Egypt at the African Cup of Nations in Côte d'Ivoire, again at the Stade Felix Houphouët stadium, and it's quite important to make sure we observe that Black Stars get inch closer to the trophy. And the next game after Egypt is against Mozambique. The Black Stars up against Mozambique, and that will be happening at the Stade Ebimpe in Abidjan, and the Stade Ebimpe. Yeah, so Abidjan. I need to start getting my French lessons together. It's quite important, and it's up against Mozambique. And the most important is that the game against Egypt would not mean anything, but that against Mozambique would mean a lot, because then Black Stars would have had 3 points against Cape Verde, then a point or 3 points against Egypt. So I take the smaller a point against Egypt, and that will give us somewhere around 4 points. Then the win against Mozambique is giving the Black Stars 7 points. It sails you through the group, and that's it. That's just it. And if Ghana goes on top of the group, meaning it will be meeting somebody in the next group that was second, and that's not a super favorite, and would have to show their class against them. This is important. This is all important for the Black Stars. And I know Chris Hughton will be staring at these fixtures and saying that I need to do some. He's not done any. He's loved this Black Stars job for quite some time, but this is the opportunity that it presents for him, especially with Ghana taking the longest over decades in not winning the African Cup of Nations. A good opportunity for Ghana to go into the African Cup of Nations in January 2024 in Côte d'Ivoire to win Ghana the trophy. I mean, this is why I share with you Group B today of the African Cup of Nations, that which Ghana belongs to. Kindly subscribe, leave your comments down in the comment box. If Ghana is going to win the African Cup of Nations, let me know. I'll be coming your way as we have our games on and on closer to the African Cup of Nations. This is Abiko Ochion here. Please subscribe and be part of this family. Leave your comment as well and share. Let other people have their views on the Black Stars of Ghana. We looked at a draw in Group B specifically for the Black Stars of Ghana. We'll meet you again next time.